Welcome back to Grimverse History, where we uncover the strange and forgotten sides of history. Tonight's journey takes us behind the marble columns and golden myths of ancient Rome, past the roaring crowds, past the triumphant salutes, and into the shadows that followed victory. In this video, we explore what truly happened during Gladiators' victory nights, when celebration blurred into something far darker, and women became part of a system history rarely speaks about. The Roman Empire called itself the most civilized power the ancient world had ever known. It praised discipline, honor. Yet on the nights of victory, screams echoed where no crowd could hear. Triumph was not rewarded with gold alone. It was rewarded with human bodies. Rome wrote the foundations of Western law, and quietly erased what happened when the gates closed. Who paid the price for Rome's idea of a glory? The air is thick, iron, sweat, oil, and something sweeter you can't name. Behind you, the crowd is still cheering. Ahead of you, a wooden door waits, unmarked, guarded, final. This is where victory continued, just not in the way you were taught. Before we go any further, take a slow breath. Let the weight of your day ease from your shoulders. You're not here to be shocked, only to witness. If you're drawn to forgotten stories like this, quietly press like, subscribe to Grimverse History, and join those who choose to listen to history after it stops applauding. You're safe here. We walk gently, lead through darkness. Let the steady hum in your room become distant thunder. Slow your breathing. Allow your thoughts to soften. Nothing demands your attention now. Accept the story. It is the year 169 say. Rome celebrates another victorious spectacle. The sand has been raked smooth. The blood is gone. Hollywood taught you to love the gladiator. Broad shoulders, a tragic past, a noble death under the sun. You learn to cheer at the right moment. Sword raised, crowd roaring, justice somehow delivered through violence. It feels clean on screen. That's the trick in Rome. At the moment the crowd turned away, at the second the gates closed. You never see that part in films. The walk back through the tunnels, the metal smell that didn't belong to weapons anymore. The way celebration followed the fighters underground. Quieter now, heavier. Victory nights were not an after party. They were a continuation. You imagine chaos, drunken shouting, uncontrolled lust. Rome preferred order. Behind the ludi, all those training schools polished by myth, there were doors that stayed shut during the day, wood thickened by oil and use, gods who didn't ask questions, schedules that did not exist on paper. The gladiator was not only a warrior, desire made safe by law, and when desire is managed by the state, it becomes efficient. You can almost hear the difference. Above ground, applause below, instructions spoken softly. No cheering, no names. The myth says glory purified everything. It touched Rome knew better. That's why the real rituals happened out of sight, not to follow it. Most empires hide their crimes behind chaos. Rome hid them behind discipline. The ludi were not just schools, they were filters. What went in came out valuable. What was left behind rarely left at all. You stand there between corridors. Rome only recorded one of them, and that omission lasted longer than the empire itself. The arena sold courage. The corridors collected the cost. History called it celebration. The air changes as you move deeper. Cooler still. This is where applause stops mattering. The word celebration. You notice it immediately? Nothing feels spontaneous. Nothing feels drunk. This is important. Rome did not improvise its cruelty. It scheduled it. The gladiator did not stumble into these nights by chance. He arrived with status all raised. They were entitled, and entitlement, in Rome, was a legal language. Transformed desire into policy, wrapped violence in reward, stamped it with approval. The gladiator became a sanctioned symbol of masculinity. Strength made erotic, danger made desirable. A fantasy the empire could control. Women entered this system all ruddies, listed like tools, assigned, reassigned. Some were prostitutes, risited, protected only insofar as property is protected. And then there were the others, the uncomfortable category, free women, daughters of merchants, wives of absent men, curious coerced, or simply delivered. Rome never wrote their reasons down. It didn't need to. The infrastructure existed long before the excuses. Ludi connected to barracks, private rooms connected to silence. You can feel it in the layout. Narrow corridors, limited exits, walls built to keep sound in, not out. You walk past one door. It is marked with nothing, no symbol, no name. That too is intentional. This was not chaos spilling over after battle. It was a system that worked precisely because it looked informal. No ceremony, no witnesses, just routine. Rome called it reward. The women called it survival. History called it nothing at all. The empire trusted gladiators with women because it trusted the system. More than morality. Because it was regulated, it could be denied. Because it was normalized, it could be ignored. Violence doesn't need to shout when it has paperwork. You pause, the stone beneath your feet is smooth. Too smooth. Thousands passed here, most of them unnamed. Romy from the future. The silence feels heavier, here not dramatic, just settled, as if it has been practicing patience for centuries. You notice the floor before anything else? Uneven stone, repaired too often for a space that was never meant to last. This is not where people lived, it is where something kept happening. That is how archaeologists began to notice it, not through stories, but through remains. In places like Pompeii, Capua, and Carnuntum, female skeletons were found inside gladiator barracks, not nearby, not outside. Inside, some were young, some older. Several showed healed fractures, others showed injuries that never had time to heal. They were not buried with care. You try to imagine the rooms, low ceilings, oil lamps, stone walls designed to contain sound rather than reflect it. No domestic objects, no signs of worship, only space and traces of repeated use. Archaeology rarely accuses, it observes, and what it observed did not match the official narrative of celebration. Not isolated excesses after a long day of games. The patterns were too consistent, too organized. This was violence without spectacle, ritual without ceremony. You might expect Roman writers to explain it. They wrote about blood in the arena, about courage, about technique and honor. But here their voices soften. Even Seneca, a critic of the games himself, never fully steps into this space. He alludes, he hints, he stops short, not because he lacked knowledge, but because knowledge carried risk. In Rome, silence was not ignorance. It was strategy. Do you feel the absence now? No graffiti scratched into the walls, no prayers carved into stone. People leave marks where they hope. They stay quiet where they endure. The historians did not miss this truth. They avoided it. The words left, the bones stayed. They waited, quietly, patiently, until someone finally noticed that history had been archived in calcium, not ink. A faint draft moves through the corridor. Cooler, more official. The corridor feels different here, straighter, cleaner, as if emotion was never invited inside. Rome believed in law the way other cultures believed in fate, cold, methodical, untroubled by what could not be measured. Pain mattered only when it damaged property, and women, in Roman law, were property. The case surfaces in 167 say, a woman named Flavia. Her name survives not because she was defended, but because her death caused inconvenience. She was found dead after a victory night. The records do not linger on how they move quickly to ownership, who lost her, who must be compensated. You might expect a trial about violence. Rome offered an inventory. The question was never what was done to Flavia. The question was what her death disrupted. She belonged to someone, a father, a husband, a guardian. That relationship determined the outcome, more than her life ever could. The gladiator was not charged with murder. The system did not pause to reflect money changed hands. The matter closed, because in Rome harm to a woman was processed as harm to a man's investment, not as a crime against a person. A trained gladiator represented years of expense, food, training, maintenance. A woman represented utility. Rome liked to present itself as rational. as the birthplace of justice and order. But order was its priority, not fairness. The law did not fail Flavia. It functioned exactly as intended. After this case, the records grow quieter, not because the violence stopped, but because documentation, vacation, best interfere, description, surrender. Rome learned how to protect itself better. You step back from the imagined courtroom. The stone feels colder now, more impersonal. Justice here was never blind, only selective. Flavia's name survived briefly, just long enough to show how little it mattered. Rome balanced the books that day, and called it justice. The sound changes again as you move forward. Not louder, not quieter, just different. Less echo, more breath. This moment does not happen in the arena, and it does not happen in court. It happens in the spaces. Rome never bothered to glorify. Capua, 169. Say more. Another season of games. The issue, except this time the system hesitates. It does not break with fire or shouting. It stalls. Women begin to refuse. Not dramatically, not heroically. They stop entering certain rooms. They delay. They claim illness. They wait for instructions that never arrive. Rome had protocols for rebellion. It had nothing prepared for quiet non-participation. You can imagine the confusion spreading. Laniste recalculating Schedsel's guards, unsure whether force would expose what was meant to stay unseen. Official realizing too late how much the system depended on compliance rather than chains. She does not lead from a platform, she organizes from within. She listens. She understands where routine intersect and where a single refusal can ripple outward. The demands are almost disappointingly small. Protection, oversight, a place to complain without punishment. Nothing Rome can openly denounce, which makes the request days short enough to avoid annihilation. Rome responds with what it does best, adjustment, additional supervision, new rules written to sound humane, minor reforms that preserve the structure while changing its surface. And then comes the cost, not announced, not recorded. Chankfur's disappearance, occur quietly, ended. Sikander's name fades from the records soon after. But something remains altered. The corridors never return to their old rhythm. Too many eyes, too much awareness. The reward system begins to demand more effort than it is worth. Not morally, administratively. Rome does not fall because of these women. It bends, and empires that bend begin to crack in places they cannot see. Issue, you stand there imagining the aftermath. No monuments, no applause, just fewer doors used and more questions whispered in places meant to stay silent. History calls this a footnote. The night remembers it as interruption. Sometimes, interruption is how collapse begins. The corridor grows quiet now, not empty, just still. The torches dim in your mind, their light thinning against old stone. Far above, a city sleeps, unaware of what once moved beneath it. Stone fades into shadow, echoes soften into breath. The past folds itself away, like a page turned quietly. If these quiet journeys through forgotten history speak to you, you're always welcome to stay. A soft, like a quiet share, or a gentle subscribe, helps keep these stories alive, waiting for the next night. Goodbye, and we will meet again.